Remember that time after a night out of trick-or-treating, you had a massive bag of candy and you actually thought you were going to eat as much as possible in one day? Let's just say that plan didn't work out. You had 24 chocolate bars, 18 large lollipops, and 12 bags of chips. So you decided to have an equal amount of chocolate bars, lollipops, and chips for as many days as possible. How? You found what is called the greatest common factor. The first step is to find how many factors each number has. Just a reminder, a factor is just a whole number value that evenly divides into another number. Therefore, there are no remainders. So with the number 24, these are the numbers that evenly divide into it. With number 18, these are the numbers that divide into it. And lastly, these are the numbers that evenly divide into number 12. Now that you have the factors for 24, 18, and 12, find the greatest or highest common factor. In this case, the number 6 is the highest value that they all share in common. Therefore, it would take a maximum of 6 days to evenly have all the treats. Let's see what that means per day. So we divide 24, 18, and 12 by 6. That means each day you will have 4 chocolate bars, 3 lollipops, and 2 bags of chips. And just like that, you have found the greatest common factor to find the most days you can equally have the treats. Now, let's look at these numbers again. This time, we'll add algebra magic to the mix. Now, don't panic. The good news is you find the greatest common factor with the y variables the same way you did with the numbers. So with y to the power of 3, it can be evenly divided by the factors y, y squared, and y to the power of 3. For y squared, the factors are y and y squared. And lastly, for y, the factor is just y. Now when we take a look at the greatest common factor, you'll notice that y is the only factor that they share in common. So, where do we go from here? Once you find greatest common factors, you open up brackets. Unlike other simplifying methods that remove brackets from expressions by multiplying terms, factoring does the opposite and divides terms. Think of the greatest common factor as the highest value being kicked out of a group. So we have 6 as the greatest common factor for the number coefficients. Therefore, kick out the 6 and place it outside the brackets. Inside the brackets are the remaining coefficients that have been divided by 6. Now we do the same with the y variable, which is the greatest common factor. Kick it out and place it beside the 6 outside the brackets. The variables that remain inside are to be divided by y. Y to the power of 3 divided by y is y squared. Y squared divided by y is y. And lastly, y divided by y is 1. Therefore, when we remove the greatest common factor from 18y to the power of 3 plus 24y squared plus 12y, we get a final answer of 6y times 3y squared plus 4y plus 2. Let's now find the greatest common factor for this. Why not? Now you have 2 variables to factor. Again, it's all the same process. First, let's get the greatest common factor for the number coefficients 3 and 9. For 3, its factors are 1 and 3, and for the number 9, its factors are 1, 3, and 9. In this case, the greatest common factor is 3. Therefore, the number 3 will be kicked out of the group and placed outside the brackets. This means the remaining values will be divided by 3. Now we can do the exact same thing for the n variables. For n squared, it can be divided by n or n squared. In this case, since both n variables are the same, the greatest common factor is itself. So n squared is being taken to the outside of the brackets, and what remains is divided by n squared. The result of n squared being divided by itself is 1. Lastly, we find the greatest common factor for the o variables. For o to the power of 3, its factors are o to the power of 2, and o to the power of 3. For o, its only factor is itself. That means the greatest common factor is just o. Now place it outside the brackets and divide the o variables by o. Now that factoring out is done, we get a final answer of 3n squared o times o squared minus 3. And there you have it. Factoring is extremely useful for solving equations that otherwise could look frightening and time-consuming. Simply find the highest value that can be divided into a number coefficient or unknown variable. Then place that value outside the brackets and leave the remaining divided terms inside. Well, that's a wrap. Now get to studying.